Ethan lifted his champagne glass with the confidence of someone who had never expected to be challenged. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, grinning across the rehearsal dinner, "before tomorrow's wedding, I have to thank my little sister. Every successful executive needs someone willing to handle the paperwork." Laughter rolled across the room. He turned toward me with an exaggerated smile. "Seriously, that's all Flora does. While the rest of us build companies, she makes sure the forms are filed." Another wave of laughter followed. Even our parents joined in. My mother leaned toward one of the bridesmaids and whispered loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, "She's always been happiest behind a desk." Several of Ethan's coworkers nodded politely, already deciding exactly who I was. Just another administrative employee. Just another quiet younger sister. I smiled anyway. "Congratulations, Ethan," I said softly, lifting my own glass. Nothing more. No correction. No argument. No wounded pride. Only one person in the room wasn't laughing. Across the table, Ethan's future mother-in-law lowered her wineglass and looked directly at me. Not with pity. Recognition. Our eyes met for only a second before she carefully hid her reaction. Interesting, I thought. She remembers. The conversation moved on, but Ethan wasn't finished. Every few minutes, another joke found its way back to me. "If paperwork ever becomes an Olympic sport," he laughed, "Flora will finally win something." His friends nearly spilled their drinks laughing. One executive from Ethan's company chuckled and said, "Well, every office needs somebody keeping the printers alive." I simply smiled. The truth was protected by something far stronger than embarrassment. Confidentiality. Correcting Ethan would require exposing information that belonged to clients, directors, and shareholders, not to me. My silence wasn't weakness. It was professional obligation. A few minutes later, my phone vibrated. I excused myself and stepped onto the terrace overlooking the gardens. "Yes," I answered quietly. "The chairman confirmed everything," the voice said. "You're fully authorized if the subject comes up tomorrow." Understood. Nothing else needed to be said. When I returned inside, Ethan smirked. "Work never stops for the paperwork department, huh?" More laughter. Even then, I didn't answer. As dinner drew to a close, Ethan tapped his glass one final time. "Tomorrow," he announced proudly, "we're opening the reception to family toasts. Anyone who wants to say a few words is welcome." Everyone applauded. I simply nodded. Across the room, his fiancée's mother continued watching me with growing curiosity, as though she just remembered something everyone else had forgotten. What exactly did she know that no one else in that ballroom did? The next morning, sunlight poured through the chapel windows, while guests admired the flowers and photographers rushed from room to room. I stood alone outside the bridal suite, fastening the cuff of my navy blazer when my best friend, Naomi, walked over carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed me one without saying anything. After a moment, she sighed. "Flora, why do you let him do this?" I looked toward the garden, where Ethan laughed with his groomsmen. "Do what?" "Treat you like you don't matter." I smiled faintly. "It keeps the peace." Naomi shook her head. "No, it protects him." It hadn't started at the rehearsal dinner. It had started years earlier. Whenever relatives asked what I did for a living, Ethan always answered before I could. "My sister handles paperwork. At Christmas. At birthdays. At family reunions." Eventually, everyone stopped asking me directly. Our parents never corrected him. Instead, Dad would proudly add, "Ethan's the one making the big business decisions." I simply let the conversation move on. Not because Ethan was right. Because the truth belonged to clients who trusted me. Corporate law didn't allow me to discuss transactions over dinner tables. Professional ethics demanded silence. even when silence cost me my own reputation. Ironically, Ethan depended on that silence. Whenever one of his contracts arrived with missing clauses or dangerous language, my phone would ring. "Flora," he'd say casually, "can you look this over before Monday?" I always did. Not because he thanked me, because mistakes at that level could cost innocent employees their jobs. He never mentioned my help afterward. Monday morning, he'd present the corrected documents as though he'd prepared them himself. Everyone applauded. I returned to my office. No applause. No acknowledgement. Just another confidential file. Naomi stirred her coffee. "You know he'll embarrass you again tonight." "I know. And you're still going." "He's my brother." She looked frustrated. "You're protecting someone who doesn't deserve it." I answered quietly. "I'm protecting my profession." That wasn't something Ethan, or most of my family, had ever understood. Across the hotel lobby, Ethan was rehearsing another speech with two coworkers. I overheard him laugh. "I'm definitely using the paperwork joke again tonight. It always gets people." The men laughed with him. None of them realized every major acquisition Ethan loved discussing had first landed on my desk. Every contract, every negotiation, every legal strategy. I had touched them all, yet not one person in that conversation knew it. Inside the bridal suite, Ethan's fiancée adjusted her veil while talking with her mother. "I swear," she laughed, "Ethan says Flora barely leaves the records department." Her mother didn't smile. Instead, she frowned. "That's strain." "What is?" I could have sworn I've heard her speak during executive legal meetings. The bride blinked. "You're probably thinking of someone else." "Maybe." But her voice lacked conviction. Just then my phone buzzed again. A single encrypted message appeared. "Everything is approved." I typed only 2 words. "Thank you." I locked the screen before anyone could see it. No explanations. No celebration. No hint of what had just been approved. As I slipped the phone back into my pocket, Ethan's future mother-in-law walked toward me slowly. She stopped only a few feet away. Studying my face, she asked quietly, "Have we met somewhere important?" The ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers as nearly 300 guests settled into their seats. Executives mingled with family. Attorneys spoke with investors. Friends toasted the newlyweds. From the outside, it looked like the perfect wedding reception. Inside, I knew Ethan was waiting for his favorite audience. The microphone. When dinner ended, the master of ceremonies smiled. "And now, we'd like to invite our groom to say a few words." Applause filled the room. Ethan rose confidently, straightened his tuxedo, and accepted the microphone. He was completely at ease. "I've been blessed," he began. "An incredible wife, amazing parents, great mentors, and a career I could only have dreamed about." The executives from his company nodded proudly. He spoke about leadership, vision, determination. Then he smiled toward the chairman seated near the head table. "Our biggest acquisition last year changed everything for the company. Leading that project remains the proudest achievement of my career." More applause. The chairman politely clapped. Nothing more. Ethan took a sip of champagne before grinning. And of course, several relatives immediately started laughing. They knew another joke was coming. And none of it would have happened without my little sister. He pointed directly at me. "There she is." Guests turned toward my table. "I mean, somebody has to keep the printers working and the paperwork organized, while the executives actually make the important decisions." Laughter exploded across the ballroom. One of Ethan's college friends nearly spilled his drink. Our father laughed loudest. "That's our Ethan." My mother smiled proudly. "He never misses." I simply folded the speech resting beside my plate. I had written it days earlier. A simple congratulation. Nothing more. Quietly, I folded it once. Then again. Across the room, only a handful of people weren't laughing. The chairman had stopped smiling. Beside him, the company's chief financial officer slowly lowered his glass. Another executive exchanged an uneasy glance with corporate counsel. No one spoke. But something had changed. Ethan didn't notice. He thought everyone admired him. Instead, several people were beginning to realize exactly what he had just claimed. His new wife leaned toward him, whispering with a nervous smile. "Maybe that's enough." He laughed. "Oh, Flora knows I'm kidding." Without looking at me. Without asking. Without wondering whether I found any of it amusing. Then I noticed movement beside the head table. Ethan's mother-in-law quietly leaned toward the chairman. The two exchanged only a few words. The chairman answered with a single nod. Neither of them looked surprised. Only resolved. The master of ceremonies stepped forward. "Thank you, Ethan. What a wonderful speech." He checked his schedule. "We'll now move on to dessert." One moment. The interruption came from the bride's mother. Her voice was calm, respectful, yet impossible to ignore. The ballroom fell silent. She stood slowly and smiled toward the audience. "If our families don't mind, I believe there's one person who should speak before we continue." Every guest looked around the room. She turned directly toward me. "Flora." She smiled warmly. "I think everyone deserves to hear from Ethan's sister." For the first time all evening, Ethan's confident smile faltered. The master of ceremonies looked uncertain before handing me the microphone. As I stood, nearly 300 pairs of eyes followed me across the ballroom. No one laughed now. No one whispered. The only sound was the soft tap of my heels against the marble floor as I reached the center of the room. I accepted the microphone, looked once at Ethan, then at the chairman. He gave me the smallest nod. Permission. I raised the microphone. "My brother is right about one thing." The room froze. "My brother is right about one thing," I said, looking around the ballroom. "For many years, I have handled paperwork." A few nervous laughs drifted through the room. Ethan smiled again. He thought I was about to play along. "But," I continued calmly, "the kind of paperwork I handle has a habit of deciding whether billion-dollar transactions succeed or collapse." The laughter stopped. Completely. I turned toward the newlyweds. "Ethan, congratulations on your marriage. I genuinely wish you and Claire a lifetime of happiness." He forced another smile. "Thanks, Flora. I also appreciate your confidence in my work." He frowned. "My work?" "Yes. The paperwork." I walked a few slow steps across the ballroom. No client has ever hired me to organize filing cabinets. Silence. No board of directors has ever asked me to refill a printer. Several executives shifted in their seats. I've spent the last 11 years practicing corporate law. I paused. Specifically, mergers and acquisitions. Someone near the executive tables quietly whispered, "And what?" I looked toward the chairman. "With your permission." He nodded. "You have it." That single sentence immediately caught the attention of every executive present. The chairman wasn't surprised. He wasn't confused. He already knew exactly where this was going. "I have never discussed my clients outside authorized settings," I continued. Not because I was ashamed of my profession. I looked directly at Ethan. But because confidentiality isn't optional. My eyes swept across the ballroom. It is the foundation of trust. I reached into the leather portfolio I'd carried with me all evening. "I won't disclose privileged information tonight." I removed several neatly organized documents. But I will reference documents already available to the public. The ballroom projector still displayed wedding photographs. The chairman quietly spoke to an event technician. Seconds later, the screen changed. Instead of childhood pictures, an official corporate press release appeared. Then another. Then another. Every document was publicly available. Everyone listed the same words. Lead legal counsel, Flora Whitmore. Murmurs spread across the ballroom. Someone gasped. Another executive leaned forward. No. I calmly continued. The acquisition Ethan mentioned during his speech closed 18 months ago. I pointed toward the screen. My name appears in every public filing submitted to federal regulators. Another document appeared. Then another. Board announcements. Corporate disclosures. Industry publications. Everyone carried the same credit. Lead counsel. Chief negotiator. Transaction director. Not Ethan. Me. The chief financial officer slowly removed his glasses. I told you, he whispered to another executive. I knew I'd seen her before. Across the room, conversations erupted in hushed voices. She's that Flora Whitmore. The attorney. The one who led the Raven Technologies acquisition. I attended one of her negotiations. I had no idea she was Ethan's sister. Claire stared at the projection. Then at me. Then back at Ethan. Ethan. Her voice barely escaped. You said those negotiations were yours. Ethan swallowed. They were, I participated. You said you led them. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Our parents looked completely stunned. Dad finally spoke. Flora. His voice cracked. You never told us. I answered gently. You never asked. The words landed harder than any accusation. I continued. My brother deserves credit for the work he actually performed. I deliberately avoided sarcasm. He attended executive meetings. He coordinated operational teams. He worked hard. I looked directly at him. But legal strategy. I paused. Was never his responsibility. The ballroom had become perfectly still. I picked up one final document. This, I said quietly, is a public acknowledgement issued after the acquisition closed. I held it toward the guests. It thanks the legal team for preventing a contractual oversight that would have exposed the company to hundreds of millions of dollars in liability. Several executives nodded immediately. They remembered. I slowly lowered the page. I was responsible for identifying that error less than 48 hours before closing. Claire covered her mouth. Our mother sat down without realizing she had been standing. Ethan suddenly rushed forward. Flora. His voice was low. Please. He reached for the microphone. Don't do this here. I calmly stepped back, keeping my voice steady. I looked directly into his eyes. Then answered so quietly, the entire ballroom leaned forward to hear. You should have thought about that. Before you told everyone I only handled paperwork. For several long seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. The only sound in the ballroom was the soft hum of the air conditioning. Then the chairman slowly stood. Every executive at his table followed. One after another. Not to defend Ethan. To acknowledge me. The chairman adjusted his jacket before speaking into the room. I believe there has been enough confusion tonight. He looked toward the guests. So let me remove any doubt. He turned to me. Ms. Whitmore has represented our company on some of the most complex transactions in its history. He paused. The acquisition my executive team celebrated 18 months ago would not have closed successfully without her. His voice remained calm. That isn't an opinion. It's a matter of corporate record. No one laughed anymore. Ethan stared at the floor. The confidence he'd worn all weekend disappeared. Claire slowly stepped away from him. "You told me," she whispered. "You told me they trusted you with everything." Ethan reached for her hand. "I helped. You said you let it. You let me believe you built your reputation yourself." He couldn't answer. Claire's mother finally spoke. "I recognized Flora the moment Ethan introduced her." Everyone turned toward her. "We served together on the charitable foundation that celebrated the acquisition." She smiled sadly. She never introduced herself as the attorney who saved the deal. In fact, she spent the evening congratulating everyone else. She looked directly at Ethan. "I assumed your family already knew who she was." Silence answered her. My father slowly removed his glasses. His hands trembled. "I don't understand." He looked between Ethan and me. "All these years. You really did all of that?" I nodded. "I did my job. And you never said anything." "There wasn't anything to say." "You believed Ethan." Mom covered her face. "We thought." "You thought what he wanted you to think," I answered gently. "I never corrected anyone." Dad's shoulders slumped. "I failed you." For the first time in years, he wasn't defending Ethan. He was confronting himself. One of Ethan's coworkers stood unexpectedly. "I owe Flora an apology." Another executive nodded. "So do I." I always wondered why senior leadership insisted she attend negotiations. I assumed she was taking notes. The company's chief financial officer smiled faintly. She wasn't taking notes. She was leading the room. More executives nodded. One admitted half the decisions we implemented came from her legal strategy. Another added, most of us simply assumed everyone already knew. Ethan finally stepped toward me. "I'm sorry." His voice shook. "I didn't think." "No," I replied quietly. "You didn't." He looked around the ballroom. "I never meant for this to happen." I met his eyes. "It didn't happen tonight. It happened every time you introduced me as someone who only handled paperwork. Every birthday. Every holiday. Every family gathering. Tonight was simply the first time the truth was allowed to answer." He lowered his head. There was nothing left to argue. The chairman cleared his throat. "As for company matters." Every executive looked toward him. "We'll be conducting a formal review regarding the public representations made about leadership responsibilities on the acquisition." No one needed further explanation. Claiming another person's work wasn't merely embarrassing. Inside a public corporation, it raised serious ethical concerns. Ethan closed his eyes. He understood exactly what that meant. The promotion he'd proudly celebrated only weeks earlier was no longer secure. His credibility had become the subject of an official review. Not because I demanded it, because the facts required it. The reception eventually continued. Music returned. Dinner resumed. But nothing felt the same. Relatives who had laughed during the rehearsal dinner quietly approached my table. "I'm sorry." I believed him. "We should have asked you." I accepted every apology with the same response. "Thank you." No speeches. No revenge. No humiliation. The truth had already done everything it needed to do. Claire asked if she could speak with me privately before the evening ended. "I owe you an apology too." "You don't." "I laughed yesterday. You believed someone you trusted." Tears formed in her eyes. "I wish I'd asked one question." "So do I." She hugged me. "I hope someday this family deserves you." I smiled. "I hope so too." Several months later, the company announced my promotion to general counsel. Not because of the wedding. because another international acquisition had closed successfully under my leadership. This time, the announcement included my photograph, my name, my title. There was no confusion. No one called me the paperwork girl. No one introduced me as someone else's assistant. They introduced me exactly as I was. My relationship with Ethan never returned to what it had once been. We remained civil, respectful, but distance replaced denial. Some wounds heal. Others become boundaries. Our parents spent the following months trying to rebuild the trust they'd lost. For the first time in my life, they listened before they assumed. That mattered more than any apology. Looking back, I don't remember the laughter from the rehearsal dinner anymore. I remember what happened after it stopped. Because in the end, they laughed when he said I only handled paperwork. The paperwork quietly revealed who had been building the future all along.